do that.
Back in regular session at 22 minutes after 11. We have a motion to regular session.
So moved.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. I have a settlement agreement for litigation between the Douglas County Commission and the JB. Do I hear a motion to approve this?
So moved.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Motion approved.
Copy.
Yes, as soon as it's signed by Shirley, acting as the president of the meeting, then we will make copies, however many copies are necessary. You all can have a copy.
Darlene Taylor with Parks Working Group. In a quick sentence, maybe what is the settlement agreement?
Yeah, currently there is a circuit court action that's in front of Judge Sweeney that was filed by JB, two companies, but I'll just refer to it as JB. Their complaint was in part that when Judge Sweeney ruled the prior ordinance unconstitutional, that it was only a ruling in part to rule it unconstitutional, and that after the county commission entered a moratorium on receipt of further applications and construction within the floodplain to get a permit to do construction within the floodplain, JB attempted to appeal the moratorium within the process of the old ordinance. The county commission took the position that they were not going to hear that appeal and preferred that a new ordinance be put in place, because we didn't really see sound reasoning in entertaining at a floodplain appeals board level a decision to grant or deny a permit without the necessary persons being put on notice, as was required by Judge Sweeney in his ruling in December. So the agreement is that essentially the Doddridge County Commission will diligently implement the new ordinance in a timely fashion, pursuant to the deadline set forth in the ordinance, to consider the application that has now been refiled for JB. And the current circuit court action was essentially continued by the circuit court to August 2. If in fact ultimately the floodplain, there are two scenarios under the agreement. If the floodplain administrator makes a decision to grant the permit and there's no objection for appeal to the Floodplain Appeals Board, then JB will, on their own motion, dismiss the circuit court action, essentially with prejudice. There will be no compensation paid by the Doddridge County to JB. If the floodplain administrator denies the permit, and the floodplain administrator and the Floodplain Appeals Board retains its independent right under the ordinance to grant or deny. If, in fact, the floodplain administrator denies the permit, or the Floodplain Appeals Board grants an appeal to an objectioner, and ultimately JB is not awarded their permit under those two scenarios, then the circuit court action would remain active and JB would have the right to pursue the remedies that they seek in the Circuit Court of Doddridge County in front of Judge Sweeney. So essentially, ma'am, I'm not here to discipline anyone, but you're smirking and laughing
amazed
when someone
because
else
this
is
doesn't
commenting
make
is disingenuous, it's disrespectful.
No,
I've
no,
attempted
that
through
is
the whole
what's
process
unbelievable.
to respect you and every other citizen in Doddridge County,
Well, I
and I'm offended by the fact that you're over there continually laughing
I'm
and
not
smirking
laughing,
and
I'm just in
making
amazement.
faces when I'm trying to respond to a question
I'm
that's
offended by
legitimate.
you and what you're doing.
Well,
to
you can get
represent
up
the
and
people
say
of
that if
County.
you wish,
I
but
did,
do it after I'm
just
done. You
Okay.
can tell me I'm full of shit.
Well,
But,
you want me to, I'm just my opinion.
You know, please don't please
I know you did
don't
what you-
talk
I know
while
you
I'm
did
talking.
what you did. I saw
It's
them.
disrespectful.
I wasn't talking, you
You're
addressed
just
me.
smirking and laughing, and
I was-
it's disrespectful.
No, well, in your opinion it is.
It
but
is,
I'll
in
tell
my
you what,
opinion, it is.
it doesn't matter. Your opinion doesn't matter in that, what I do. I'm sorry, not publicly.
I've forgotten where I was at.
You were at the part, then JB can. What can JB do? What-
Yeah, JB can, complete whatever action they believe is necessary in the circuit court action. The Doddridge County Commission would be ready to defend that with the answer that we've put on record and the affirmative defenses that we've placed on record, one of which is that JB unlawfully began the process of construction in the floodplain area, and we have alleged in our affirmative defense that they come to the court of equity in part with unclean hands, which is a legal defense to the request in equity. We also have the right to make the argument, which we've laid out in our answer, that the Doddridge County Commission did diligently, in good faith, pursue a remediation of the ordinance that Judge Sweeney held unconstitutional. And it took a lot of time to do that. It was a major renovation of the ordinance. The Doddridge County Commission was respectful of all commenters, and as you all know, you all commented. We had a public hearing that started at 4 p.m. and ended at 11 p.m. Mr. Sneed was involved in that and gave his thoughts and testimony. So our position with respect to the Doddridge County Circuit Court is that we did it as efficiently and as diligently in good faith as we could, based upon the level of comment and essentially the various warring factions of opinions with respect to how the ordinance should be shaped and molded for reenactment. And it took some time to do that because, as I've stated before, Doddridge County became ground zero for revision of this ordinance that was written many years ago by FEMA. In my humble opinion, was a horrible written document with respect to how it was organized, how it was written. It in fact referenced West Virginia State Code and regulations that were not even on the books or in our books. So it took a lot of time to get it correct. And I wasn't, while I served as the scrivener, we adopted suggestions that were made by landowners, by mineral rights owners, and by the industry to come to what I believe is a more perfect ordinance. Not a perfect ordinance, but a more perfect ordinance that the county here in Doddridge can be proud of.
Thank you for that description.
Have you signed the document?
Yes.
Okay, and Dan Wellings is also a defendant, so naturally Dan's not here because he's at the floodplain meeting, but he will also need to sign the original, and I understand Beth is going to take possession of the original. Once Dan signs it, you will get it back to me, please, and then I will endorse it and get it to JB's lawyers.
Should we not get a copy
Thank
of
you.
the hand signs? Mr. Tennant, like your opinion on this?
No, you can have a copy today. It doesn't.
all right.
May I make a comment about your comment to her? Is we sat and watched you at that meeting when we had the FEMA meeting and everything that you were talking about until 11 o'clock at night, and you were smiling and winking with EQT when people on this side were making comments?
No, not at all. Not at all. I mean, I will tell you that I thought Steve Hastings for EQT was professional in conversing with you all. He was respectful of you, and when I say you, I'm saying in plural, the group, when people interrupted people that were speaking who had the floor. And while I had a good working relationship with both David McMahon and Mrs. Huff's attorney and Mr. Hastings, I am not a homer for EQT or the oil and gas industry. I'm here to properly represent the Dodge County Commission. And I feel disrespected when I have the floor and this lady, and I don't know your name, continues to act the way she acts in a public meeting. And frankly, if I was the president of the commission, if I was the president of the county commission, I'd have a deputy here, and for that type of misbehavior, I would escort that
Well, if I was
person
the
out
county
of the
commission,
room.
I'd have you disbarred because of the way you're representing the county. Because I
Well-
don't think you're representing them properly.
Yeah, well,
And,
Any other
and we
comments?
were, yes, we were interrupted too at that meeting by, it went back and forth. It was,
well, as I sat there and as I recall that meeting, there were 2 or 3 people in the back row that continually interrupted people with comments and sarcasm that was inappropriate, frankly. And to the extent that I might have agreed with Mr. Hastings when he had the floor and he was interrupted, I will say, on a professional basis, Mr. Hastings respected all those folks there and tried to professionally respond with his either personal opinion or the opinion of EQT. And I thought he did an admirable job at that meeting, quite professional in the way it was presented.
I just have one question. Now, the county commission has hired you as their attorney to represent the county commission who represents the people. And where does the money come from that pays for the legal fees?
It's from the tax dollars.
Right, taxpayers, okay? So when taxpayers feel that we, through you as our vessel, are not being adequately represented,
Well, you see, I mean, that's...
I know what you're saying, but the thing is,
That's an opinion.
I think this is a very
Certainly.
hot subject. Wait a minute, you're interrupting me now. That's an opinion, it's a very hot subject, and
It's not on the agenda.
yeah, well, no, half the stuff that gets in here now manages to be the one that isn't, but regardless, I'm very concerned that this is not, I mean, what Mr. Tennant just described to me, in my opinion, sounds nothing less than a case of blackmail for you guys to toe the mark and give them that permit. That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Now, do I have the floor?
Sure.
The fact of the matter is that they are submitting an application, and they are either going to comply with the ordinance that we have approved, or they are not. And if they comply, then if we were to refuse, they would have legal course against us. But now,
I'll wait when you're done.
you wanted, so, we all are entitled to our opinion. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but for me personally, when I hire an attorney, I'm going to listen to what he has to say. And I'm going to, as long as what he's telling me is legal and makes good sense, I'm going to comply. Now, I understand that you don't have the same opinion, and that's perfectly okay. But you personally can't dictate what the county commission does, because we are elected to represent you. But we are elected to represent everybody. And I've heard the suggestion that, well, come election time. Well, that's true in any case. However, we are elected to represent everybody, and it's not just you. And
Absolutely.
people who believe just like you.
But by the same token, we need to know how efficiently our dollars are being managed in providing services that are here to protect us, whether it be legal representation or things that you contracted. And like I said, this whole business is a hot topic, there's no question. But what particularly concerns me is the fact that, as I brought up earlier, they sue you guys because you did what was right. They violated by not having a floodplain ordinance, and they sued you, and your response is, like I said, what's going on here now, but will the county commission, knowing that a driller has done this, has violated the floodplain ordinance prior and started construction and has done damage to properties as a result without having proper permit, should they not be prosecuted?
Actually, in listening to what the settlement was or whatever, it sounds to me like it's just giving us more time. I mean, from what little you explained, it actually sounds like a pretty good move in the fact that JB will have to follow the process. Whether or not the floodplain permit is going to be issued, that's not something that's been decided, but yet there's time to deal with the issue instead of being back down where, you know, it seems like actually a relatively smart move to take because really, in a sense, nothing's really been decided.
That is correct.
So,
Because
thank you for that.
Thank you very much. The floodplain administrator, floodplain appeals board in this agreement retains its independent right under the ordinance to either grant or deny.
Right.
It's essentially a promise by the Dodge County Commission that will comply with the ordinance.
Right.
And I'll say that it's a new ordinance, has a lot of deadlines and timeframes. Everyone is getting accustomed to the new information and the new requirements, and you know, those timeframes and deadlines could slip. And you know, I can't. You know, all that we're promising is that we will comply with the ordinance. And that's
In
it.
my opinion, Mr. Tennant has represented us intelligently and professionally and was kind of
Right, and he's representing you guys and all of us indirectly by having been hired. My other question was just the fact that, if I understood correctly, basically to summarize what you said about JB's position on the current lawsuits. If they get the permit, they'll drop it. If they don't, they're proceeding ahead. So is that basically what you said? Okay.
That is.
Okay.
That's all right.
That is.
Now,
And that's
because I have
reasonable.
my opinion and I look at somebody else and say, my opinion.
Well, that's a reasonable thing to do from the Dodge County Commission standpoint, because we avoid a major evidentiary hearing, okay, on the injunction. I mean, there could be an exhaustion of attorney's fees to write briefs, prepare witnesses, inconvenience people, and it's essentially putting everything on hold. It's essentially frozen or on ice until a decision is made pursuant to the ordinance, which I think is a reasonable position to take, given the nature of the costs that it would be incurred by the Dodge County Commission if it wasn't done. And I don't know about you, but if you can resolve a matter in such a way where you don't have to spend a lot of money, that's a preferred action for a government than vice versa. So that's the position that is kind of set forth in the settlement agreement.
And bottom line is they still have to comply with the laws.
Yeah.
But the damage that was done beforehand, when they didn't comply, nothing's going to be done about that.
Well,
That's an issue.
that's,
May I ask a question? Mr. Tennant, did you not in fact say that county commission does not sue them, but in fact it would be up to the property owners to sue? Or did I misunderstand that?
Yeah, I don't believe that the Dodge County Commission would have a cause of action against JB in civil court
I'm saying
relative, well, that's,
Prosecutor.
you don't sue someone in criminal court. You
No,
file
but the
a criminal
prosecutor
complaint
could, and the
or you
prosecutor-
indict someone in criminal court. And if the prosecutor wants to, under the old ordinance, take action, I will tell you that there will be another lawsuit filed over whether or not that old ordinance gave the prosecuting attorney authority to take that action. In fact, there will be, if it's ever done under the new ordinance, a lawsuit to determine whether the county is in a position to enact that type of criminal law. And that will be litigated likely to the Supreme Court of West Virginia. So it's, this costs money to do this. I know that you like to fight at all positions, but,
How do you know that?
well, based
That's your
upon
opinion.
watching your comments
Right,
over
that's your opinion,
time,
you don't know that.
I have the opinion that you want to fight at every point where there's a
I think it
battle
needs to be broken
and
down.
not recede or concede, and that's fine, and you can continue to do that, that's your right. But the county commission is spending money, and what is an interest of county government is to spend less money on litigation, attorney's fees, cost, time, emotional time, and ultimately potentially pay compensatory damages if we've done something that was contrary to the ordinance or contrary to the law generally. And my interest as an attorney for a public body like this is to save them money and comply with laws that are on the books. And I think we've done that. Are we finished with the floodplain issues?
Yes, we are.
Because I don't want to be disrespectful, but I do have to be in court back in Wheeling, and I'd like to leave without speeding.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good seeing you all again.